When a man occupies your thoughts constantly, yet he remains physically absent from your life, no messages, no calls, no glances across a room, it becomes necessary to ask not just why, but who he truly is. Not in the literal sense, but in the language of the unconscious. The man, as you perceive him, may not actually be a man at all, not in the full reality of his own being. Instead, he could be a projection, a psychic figure, a mirror carrying the contours of your own inner world. In the depths of the unconscious, there resides what could be described as the inner masculine. A structural archetype shaped by a woman's psyche over the course of her development. This figure is not a fantasy of romance or ideal companionship. It is a living presence in the psyche, shaping thoughts, desires, judgments, and fantasies. Depth psychology refers to this as the Animus, the counterpart to the Anima within the male unconscious. The Animus is not the man you met last summer, nor the one whose eyes lingered too long in the cafe. It is the ancient blueprint of masculinity inherited through generations, built from myths, fathers, lovers, betrayals, and ideals. When you find yourself fixated on a man who is no longer, or never was, in communication with you, this psychic process of projection may be at work. The psyche, unable to integrate its own inner masculine, casts it outward onto a figure in the external world. He becomes the canvas upon which you unconsciously paint your longing for strength, intellect, security, passion, or transcendence. The more he recedes in actual presence, the more space there is for the projection to grow. He begins to take on exaggerated dimensions. He understands you deeply. Though you have barely spoken, he could have been the one. Even if you never touched, he is dangerous, safe, enigmatic, or spiritually fated. All at once. These impressions may feel like truth, but in reality, they are archetypal forces taking form in your conscious mind. The Animus does not project arbitrarily. He finds a host, a person who, through gesture, silence, timing, or mystery, triggers the internal reservoir of unexpressed masculine energy. He may say very little, and yet his silence speaks volumes, precisely because your inner world is speaking through him. His physical absence intensifies the projection. For the less he is known, the more space your unconscious has to fill in the gaps. The man becomes both a symbol and a container for all that has not been resolved within. The unmet father, the forbidden desire, the authoritative voice, the rejected inner voice of reason or purpose. This projection can be intoxicating. It may lead you to feel a sense of destiny, of soul-level connection. The unconscious does not differentiate between external and internal reality as sharply as the ego does. To the psyche, the man is not just a man. He is Hermes, Apollo, the dark stranger, the philosopher, the savior. And so you find yourself obsessively replaying brief moments, reading into words unsaid, seeking confirmation from dreams or signs in the world. You are not delusional. You are mythologizing, and myths are powerful truths wrapped in symbol. But the projection of the Animus has consequences. It creates a psychic inflation in which you are no longer relating to the man as he is, but as an image of something he cannot possibly fulfill. Should he ever return your call, or text you back, or sit across from you with real human flaws and inconsistencies, you might feel disappointment or confusion. Because what you were in love with was not him, but the part of your psyche he unknowingly carried. This does not mean that all thoughts of him are false, or that he is irrelevant. It means he holds a psychological function far deeper than the surface drama of romance or rejection. He has become an initiator, albeit unknowingly, of your own relationship to your internal masculine qualities. He may symbolize reason if you are lost in emotion. He may symbolize power if you feel weak. He may symbolize transcendence if you are trapped in routine. In this sense, his presence in your mind is not necessarily a sign that you should reach out or rekindle anything. Rather, it is a call inward to question what this image of him evokes in you and why that image is so potent in his absence. To understand the Animus is to begin a long journey of inner integration. It requires separating the projection from the person, discerning symbol from reality, and recognizing that the man who consumes your thoughts may be nothing more, or nothing less, than your own psyche asking to be known. In the quiet between you and him, no messages, no calls, no subtle exchanges. There exists more than just the absence of communication. Silence is not a void, it is a container, often filled with meanings too elusive for the surface of language. When someone lingers in your mind, yet no words are exchanged, that silence takes on symbolic weight. It becomes a vessel for the unconscious, a theater for the shadow to perform. The shadow is not simply the dark side of the self, as it is commonly misunderstood. It is the repressed, denied, or unacknowledged part of the psyche, qualities, desires, fears, and wounds we've disowned, often unconsciously. In the realm of human relationships, especially romantic or emotionally charged ones, silence can act as a mirror that reflects this shadow back to us. When he doesn't reach out and yet you cannot stop thinking of him, it is often not about him at all. It is about what his silence evokes within you. What parts of yourself are stirred, exposed, or thrown into crisis by the lack of his presence? Silence is the stage upon which the shadow emerges. In the absence of external interaction, your internal world amplifies. You begin to hear your own voices more loudly: doubt, longing, self-blame, obsession, fantasies of reunion, revenge, or closure. These voices often arise from old psychic wounds, abandonment, unworthiness, the hunger to be seen or chosen. His silence might become the trigger, but it is your own psychic material that floods in to fill the gap. In this way, the man becomes a symbol, not just of longing or love, but of unprocessed emotion. His refusal to speak or inability to connect awakens parts of your history where you too have been muted or have muted yourself. It may bring forward childhood experiences of emotional neglect, relationships where your voice didn't matter, or moments where you learned that your presence was only valuable if it was desired. The silence doesn't simply exist now. It resonates with all the silences that have come before. You may notice the emergence of obsessive thinking, intrusive imaginings, or dreamlike fantasies where he speaks the words you want to hear. The mind loops on what could have been said, what might still be said, what must be understood. These mental narratives can become relentless, but they are often not about resolution. They are the psyche's attempt to reconcile with its own fragmentation. The man, in remaining silent, inadvertently offers a psychic space in which your unclaimed parts rise to the surface. It is a confrontation not with him, but with yourself. There is also power in silence, a power that the shadow craves and fears. If you feel powerless in his silence, it may reflect how your own power has been buried. Perhaps you've learned to speak only when spoken to retreat rather than risk, to silence your needs before they inconvenience others. His silence then becomes an echo chamber for these forgotten decisions. The ache you feel in the quiet may be your own inner voice struggling to speak, unheard for so long. It now dresses itself in the image of a man who won't call. But the silence can also disguise projection. When there is no feedback from the other, you begin to build him in your mind. He becomes who you need him to be: cold, aloof, punishing, indifferent, or tragically bound. He is both the persecutor and the victim, the one who ignores and the one who suffers. This psychic drama is not random. It is rooted in archetypal themes that live within the collective unconscious: abandonment, reunion, betrayal, sacrifice. You are not simply imagining him. You are casting him in a myth you didn't even know you were carrying. This myth is shaped by your personal and ancestral narratives. Perhaps women in your lineage were silenced, their desires dismissed, their stories left untold. Perhaps the voice you seek in him is the voice they were denied. In this way, his silence becomes a doorway to collective grief, a portal to the silence of generations. It becomes sacred, not because it is divine, but because it touches something vast and difficult to name. And yet, the most unsettling truth remains: it is not his silence that hurts the most. It is the silence within you, the one you've cultivated over years to avoid pain, to survive, to be accepted. What we do not, the one that told you to stay quiet rather than speak your truth. His absence simply brings that silence into the light. It reveals where you have not allowed yourself to take up space, to ask for what you need, to scream, to rage, to mourn. This is the shadow of silence, not simply that he does not speak, but that within his silence you encounter your own voicelessness. And it is in this reflection that the psyche trembles, because it knows it is time to listen not to him, but to what has been buried within your own depths for far too long. There is a peculiar experience that often arises when someone dwells in your thoughts, seemingly without cause or control. You might wake thinking of him, feel him in passing moments, hear his name spoken by strangers, or notice strange alignments. The song that played the last time you saw him now echoing from a passing car, or his birth date showing up on a receipt total. These moments feel charged with meaning, infused with a strange electricity, as if some invisible force is binding your interior world to his image. It is tempting to interpret these events as signs, divine messages, or evidence of a hidden connection. But the psyche does not offer simple answers. It demands that we sit with paradox. What you are experiencing may be synchronicity, or it may be obsession, or more disturbingly, both. Synchronicity is the language of the unconscious, meaningful coincidence that defies logical causality. It is not fantasy nor superstition, but an expression of the psyche's deeper layers manifesting in outer events. When an image or archetype within you is activated, it begins to color your perception of the world. You notice what is symbolically relevant to that image. If this man represents something potent within your inner world, you will begin to see echoes of him everywhere, not because the universe is conspiring to deliver him to you, but because your unconscious is seeking recognition. He has become a psychic attractor, a gravitational center for meaning. You are not imagining connections, you are living within a symbolic pattern. But obsession wears the same clothes as synchronicity. Obsession is not merely repeated thought. It is the mind's desperate attempt to resolve something unresolved. It is a closed loop that feeds on emotional intensity, especially when clarity and closure are missing. When he remains distant or silent, the lack of resolution becomes a fertile ground for fixation. The psyche abhors a vacuum, and in the absence of communication, it fills the void with meaning. Every glance at your phone, every dream in which he appears, every passing resemblance in a crowd becomes infused with urgency. The external world becomes a canvas for your interior hunger, and yet it would be too easy and psychologically shallow to dismiss these experiences as mere projection or mental fabrication. The psyche is not linear. It does not differentiate between real, imagined, the way the rational mind does. If his image stirs something in you, it is because it resonates with something real. Not necessarily about him, but about you. He may symbolize a longing, a rupture, a psychic possibility. He may not be your destiny in the literal sense, but he may be the face that your unconscious chose to activate a deeper transformation. In the labyrinth of your thoughts, the line between synchronicity and obsession begins to blur. You ask yourself questions that circle endlessly. Does he think of me too? What is the meaning of this connection if nothing is happening? The intensity itself seems to argue for significance. You wonder if he feels the same pull, the same tension in the air. But what you are truly asking is not about him. It is about your relationship to meaning itself. You are seeking coherence in a moment of fragmentation. The longing for him is also a longing for understanding, for certainty, for psychic unity. There is also a danger here. The desire to label something as synchronicity can become a defense mechanism, a way to avoid grief or discomfort. By assigning transcendent meaning to his absence, you may be bypassing the rawness of disappointment, the pain of abandonment, the emptiness that emerges when desire goes unmet. It is easier to believe that his silence is sacred than to admit that it hurts. It is easier to search for patterns than to sit with the ache of unfulfilled connection. The psyche protects itself with narrative, even when those narratives bind us more than they free us. And yet, there are moments, brief, crystalline, when the world does seem to respond. When something deep within you aligns with something outside and you feel, if only for a second, that there is a hidden order behind the chaos. That your yearning has a purpose. That your thoughts are not lost in the void, but part of a larger unfolding. In these moments, obsession melts into presence. The mind quiets, not because it has found answers, but because it is attuned to the mystery. Whether he is the cause or the symbol becomes irrelevant. What matters is that you are listening, closely, reverently, to what your inner world is trying to show you, But the question remains, lingering like smoke. Is this a sacred sign or a self-created storm? Is the world speaking? Or are you echoing within your own chamber of need? The psyche does not give linear responses. It offers symbols, tensions, and patterns, and then waits to see how you respond. Whether you interpret this connection as fate or fantasy, it is clear that something within you has been stirred, and whatever has been awakened will not be silenced until it is understood, not in thought alone, but in soul. When someone remains fixed in your thoughts, appearing uninvited in the stillness of your days and the quiet of your nights, it is easy to believe that you are drawn to him because of who he is. His qualities, his energy, his presence, or the potential you sense between you. But beneath this apparent attraction often lies something deeper, more ancient, and more personal. The man who haunts your mind may not be an object of desire so much as a mirror for your yearning. He becomes the outward image of an inward hunger, the silhouette of something missing in your own psychic landscape. His face, voice, and imagined closeness serve as a reflective surface for a longing that has existed far longer than the memory of him. This yearning is not necessarily romantic, though it often wears that disguise. It is not always sexual, though it may stir your body with heat and ache. The yearning that arises in his absence is often existential, spiritual, and rooted in the oldest parts of the self. It is the desire to be seen in a way you rarely feel seen. The desire to feel alive, touched, understood, awaken. He becomes the carrier of this longing, the imagined key to a door you have been waiting your whole life to open. But he did not forge that key. The shape of your desire was already within you before he arrived. He only fits it because you made him fit. Unconsciously, symbolically, necessarily. He reflects not himself, but a psychic image of wholeness. In Jungian terms, this is often the moment when the psyche projects the inner other, the Animus, onto an external figure. But even without theory, the experience itself reveals the truth: the man is more dream than flesh, more symbol than substance. You may feel intense emotions when you think of him, even without any shared history or real intimacy. That intensity is not about him. It is the emotional charge of your own unmet needs coming into contact with an external image that seems to promise fulfillment. He becomes a mirror not only for who you wish he were, but for who you wish you could be in his presence. Whole, loved, awakened, free. Often, this yearning is connected to a hidden grief. The grief of all the times your voice was ignored, your longing unmet, your heart stretched too wide without return. He becomes the one who might reverse the story. The one who, by turning toward you, would rewrite your past. And because he is not here, because you are not talking, the possibility remains suspended. His silence keeps the fantasy alive. If he were present, real, and flawed, the illusion might break. But in his absence, he can hold your projection perfectly. You can pour your hope into him without resistance, because he offers no contradiction. He becomes a canvas for your unlived desires. This yearning also reveals something sacred about the self's longing to reconnect with lost parts of its own soul. When he fills your mind, it may not be because of personal chemistry, but because your unconscious recognizes in him an image of what you lack. Perhaps he seems emotionally grounded and you long for stability. Perhaps he radiates power and you feel powerless. Perhaps he seems spiritually attuned and you feel disconnected from meaning. In this way, your psyche isn't simply fantasizing, it is pointing. It is signaling what it wishes to reclaim within. You are not just yearning for him, you are yearning for what he represents in you. And yet, because the yearning feels so real, so immediate, you may become convinced that it is he who must fulfill it. This is where suffering arises. The heart begins to tie itself to an outcome, that he will return, that he will reach out, that he will see you. But these hopes, while natural, bind you to an external resolution for an internal wound. They make your healing conditional upon his recognition. In doing so, they obscure the deeper truth: the man is a mirror, not a medicine. He is a symbol, not a savior. And your longing, however painful, is not a weakness. It is a message. It speaks of what has been lost, not just in love, but in the way you relate to yourself. There is a kind of initiation in yearning. It strips away illusions, exposes rawness, confronts you with emptiness you would rather ignore. It teaches you to listen, not to the imagined voice of another, but to the quiet voice of your own soul. The more deeply you yearn for him, the more deeply you are being asked to turn inward. To ask, what do I really want? What do I believe he will give me? Why do I need it so badly? And what part of me have I abandoned that now cries out through his imagined presence? In the reflection of his absence, you may begin to see yourself more clearly. The version of you that is still waiting to be chosen. The version that is still hiding behind fear. The version that believes love comes from outside rather than rising from within. He is not the source of your ache. He is the mirror, and the mirror, while it offers no comfort, never lies. Absence is not a passive state. It is an active force, one that presses inward, carves space within the psyche, and demands a reckoning with what remains unseen. When a man remains lodged in your thoughts, but no words pass between you, his absence becomes more than just lack of communication. It becomes a psychic agent, one that catalyzes transformation in a way his presence never could. In the silence, in the not knowing, in the unanswered questions and unresolved feelings, something ancient begins to stir. A quiet alchemy begins, not in the outer world of interaction, but in the furnace of your inner life. Alchemy, in its true psychological sense, is not about the literal transformation of lead into gold, but about the symbolic transformation of the self. It is the painful cyclical process by which unconscious material is brought into consciousness, refined, and ultimately integrated. And this process is often not initiated by joy, but by longing, by separation, by the absence of what we most desire. This is the crucible in which emotional intensity becomes psychic heat, the kind of heat required for transformation. The man whose silence unsettles you may not have disappeared to hurt you. He may not even know he occupies this much space in your inner world, but that is precisely what makes the absence alchemical. It strips away the possibility of closure, of rational explanation, of egoic control. You cannot resolve what is unspoken. You cannot explain what was never made clear, and so the wound remains open. But in psychological terms, this openness is not weakness. It is the necessary condition for change. His absence creates a vacuum, and nature, especially psychic nature, abhors a vacuum. The psyche begins to fill that space with questions, images, dreams, fears, fantasies. It begins to search for meaning, and in this search, you begin to encounter the full spectrum of your inner life. You meet not only the part of yourself that longs for him, but the part that fears being alone, the part that doubts her own worth, the part that still believes love must be earned. These are not new parts of you. They have always been there, beneath the surface. But it is in the heat of absence that they emerge, raw and illuminated. You may find yourself cycling through stages of grief, denial, bargaining, anger, despair. These are not just reactions to a personal event, but ancient psychic responses to disintegration. The absence of resolution destabilizes the ego. It forces a descent into the underworld of the self. And in that descent, something sacred happens. You are stripped of illusion. The image of the man, once perfect, necessary, fated, begins to dissolve, not into meaninglessness, but into mystery. He is no longer just a man. He is now an initiator, a symbol, a shadow, guide leading you into deeper layers of yourself. In this alchemical process, the ego is not in control. The transformation is not chosen, it is endured. But if you stay with it, if you do not numb it, distract it, or spiritualize it away, then something begins to change. You begin to notice that the pain itself is intelligent, that it carries knowledge, that your longing, which once seemed directed solely at him, has begun to shift inward. You begin to see that the absence is not empty at all. It is full of the contents of your unconscious rising to meet you. There may be dreams, strange, vivid, archetypal. There may be creative bursts, poetry, music, sudden insights that feel ancient and new at once. These are signs that the alchemy is working, that something is being transformed. Not the man, not the situation, but you. The woman who once believed she needed him to feel whole begins to meet the forgotten figures of her own psyche. The child who was overlooked, the lover who was abandoned, the warrior who was silenced, and in doing so, she begins to integrate, to become more than she was. The absence becomes a fire that burns away illusion. It melts the ego's expectations. It purifies the heart of its dependencies. And in its aftermath, what remains is not bitterness, but clarity. Not need, but presence. The man may never return. He may never explain, apologize, or even remember. But by then, he is no longer the point. His silence was only the catalyst. The true work, the sacred, interior work, was always yours. Absence has made you face the self you had long buried. It has taken the image of another and used it as a crucible in which to refine your own soul. This is the secret of psychic alchemy. What disappears in the outer world becomes the material of inner transformation. You were not abandoned by him, you were summoned by yourself. And what has been summoned in silence will not leave you unchanged.